Hello, thanks for joining. Today we are going to be looking at the prelude to the Gospel of John, specifically chapter 1, verse 1 through 5, and verse 14. And we're specifically going to be looking at the word, which from the original text was logos. And so we're going to be talking about how our language just doesn't have a word to sufficiently translate the word logos, and they use the word and really that does not describe exactly what logos does not describe at all what logos is intended to say. So we're going to look at the depth and detail of this word logos. We're also going to look at the way this word started and how it grew and manifested into what it was when Jesus was alive and actually when John wrote his gospel. And so just a little warning that this is going to be depth and detailed, and so if you don't track well when people start using big words and deep sentences, then you may phase a little bit, but I promise you at the end we'll make this very simple. We'll bring it all together. But this is one of the most important concepts that you will gain as you read the Gospels, because this word logos has so much depth that you will understand Christ much better. You will understand Jesus much better by understanding this word, and you will definitely understand these verses much better than you did when you looked at them just as using the word. So let's start out. If you want to follow, we're going to be in John 1. And I'm going to read verses 1 through 5 and 14. So John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Verses 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. So as we work through this, just want you to know that I've pulled from many sources on this. I've tried to get a steady of what all these different sources were saying. As I read this is definitely not my words. These are words from different dictionaries and study sources, and so this is all available to you. I always recommend that you go and don't just listen to me. Go back and double check me. You can find all these sources and dictionaries online, however you want to find them. So as with that, we're going to go ahead and get into this word logos and get into the detail of this word logos. So first, just the understanding that the word logos was developed specifically for the use in early philosophy. Just so at these times, probably forever, men have been trying to figure out where we came from, how we got here, what our purpose is. That's philosophy, trying to understand things that don't have a specific knowledge, and trying to understand things that just don't have a full understanding. So we're going to start way back. As far as study understands, the word was developed as far back as 1500 years before the birth of Jesus. And so in ancient philosophy, logos was first used by a man named Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher 1500 years before the birth of Jesus. He used the term logos to describe the universal law, or the principle that inherently ordered the cosmos and regulated its phenomenon. And so this first use of the word is trying to figure out how this world exists, understanding that there is universal law, understanding that we all tend to abide by and follow by some, at least, universal principles without ever being taught. Just naturally we all tend to abide by some universal principles or at least understand that those principles, we understand them the same way. And so this gentleman was trying to figure out what it was that caused us to all follow these general principles, understanding that it's not inborn, it's not passed down from generation to generation. These are just things, these are thoughts that we all generally hold in common, and something he believed regulated this commonology. So let's fast forward about 1,000 years to three guys that most of us at least know them by name: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And stop here for 1 second just to understand that the teachings of these gentlemen not only regulated thought at that time, but still regulates our thought in these days. Anybody who is into philosophy now knows that these three guys were fundamental in creating some of the basic thoughts that we think up to today. They also really regulated a lot of the thought, even of guys like John. John would have been definitely following and understanding the teachings of these guys just because they were regulating thought at that time. So these three guys believed that the Logos was the term established to describe the faculty of human reason and the knowledge men had of the known the known world and other animals. Aristotle, who studied under Plato and who was much more of a practical thinker, first developed the concept of logic as a depiction of the rules of human rationality. So logos obviously is where we get our word logic, and that was developed because of these three guys. Some of our basic words that we have today come from guys like these three guys. And we understand and define words much by how they thought. And so these guys believed much the same way, but they were kind of taking God out of the picture just a little bit and saying that there is just a general logic that all men have to be able to figure out the known world and other people. Not necessarily that there was a cosmic rule for this, but yet they did continue to develop off that thought. So whether they were trying to change the word and take the cosmic thought out of it or not, we don't fully understand. But we do know that they were trying to develop this word into a different way. So about the same time as these three guys, there was another group of people that were thinking and following the thought. Around 300 BC, Stoic philosophy began with a man named Zeno. For the Stoics, the Logos was the active reason pervading and animating the universe. It was conceived as material and usually identified with God or nature. The Stoics also referred to the seminal Logos, that's a term they had, seminal Logos, or the law of the generation of the universe, which was the principle of the active reason working within inanimate matter. So they had the same understanding that there is this principle acting to cause us all to think or reason much the same way, but they were identifying that with a universal God or a universal energy. So much the same as Aristotle and Plato, except for they were adding that there is something going on in the universe causing this all to come into play. So the Stoics believe that humans too each possess a portion of the divine Logos. So not only was this a cosmic energy, but it was a divine energy, and they believe that humans all possessed a piece of that divine energy that causes us all to come to a rational thought. The Stoics took all activity to imply a Logos or spiritual principle. As the operative principle of the world, the Logos was Latin anima mundi, which means the world soul. So according to several systems of thought, it is an intrinsic connection between all living things on the planet, which relates to the world in much the same way as the soul is connected to the human body. I'm going to reread that. The world soul is, according to several systems of thought, an intrinsic connection between all living things on the planet, which relates to the world in much the same way as the soul is connected to the human body. Plato adhered to this idea, and it was an important component of future systems of thought. In 1964, the Anglican priest Maxwell Steinfurth wrote that logos had long been one of the leading terms of Stoicism, chosen originally for the purpose of explaining how deity came into relation with the universe. So as this thought of the logos continues to develop, it's developing into the understanding that there is a creator, or there is a energy in the universe, and that energy somehow connects with human beings. And this energy is beginning to come into the understanding of a deity or a god. So the understanding that there is a deity, and that deity is far from us, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, and that deity somehow is in relation with man. And the logos is the in-between, it's the bridge that brings that connection between deity and man. And this is how this thought is developing over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years. And so we're going to finish with Hellenistic Judaism, because this is the most important group that we're going to talk about, because this is the group that very likely John was writing to. It was very likely that the Hellenistic Jews, or at this point they transferred to Hellenistic Christians, and it's very, very likely that this is who John was writing to. John wrote the book of John in Greek. He obviously would not have been writing specifically to Hebrews, because the Hebrews probably wouldn't have been able to read Greek. But Hellenistic Jews could, because what a Hellenistic Jew was a Greek. It was a Greek person who came into Judaism. But when they came into Judaism, they kept much of their Greek thought. So they were a mix. They were just a cross between a Greek and a Jew. Yet they took Judaism on as their religion. And so there's a kind of a secondary thought there. I mean, really, in realistic, today, so much of Christianity is that same way. People come into Christianity, and instead of fully engaging and taking on the religion of Christianity, they bring the worldview they have into Christianity. They hold some of their worldview, some of the Christian worldview. They never fully go one way or the other, and that is an extreme problem in Christianity today. So that's a sidebar, but that's really what a Hellenistic Jew was. It was a Greek person who wanted to take on Judaism but did not want to give up all of their thought. Nevertheless, this was an important group that was going on that day, and we're seeing that this group existed between, well, the leader of their group existed between 20 BC and 50 AD, right there where Jesus existed, right there where Jesus came into existence. So between 20 BC and 50 AD, Philo, a Hellenized Jew, used the term logos to mean an intermediary divine being. Philo followed the Platonic distinction between imperfect matter and perfect form, and therefore intermediary beings were necessary to bridge the enormous gap between God and the material world. The Logos was the highest of these intermediary beings, and was called by Philo the firstborn of God. Philo also wrote that the Logos of the living God is the bond of everything, holding all things together and binding all the parts, and prevents them from being dissolved and separated. Plato's theory of forms was located within the Logos, But the Logos also acted on behalf of God in the physical world. In particular, the angel of the Lord in the Hebrew Bible was identified with the Logos by Philo, who also said that the Logos was God's instrument in the creation of the universe. Now, it's going to be hard for you, if you know the book of John, to back off and understand that these guys did not know who Jesus was. These guys were not basing this on Jesus. These guys were just saying that there's this being, there's this energy, there's this thing that connects God with man. And we don't know what that is. We call it the Logos. And we just understand that it is. And so enter the Gospel of John with the idea that you don't know anything about Jesus or who Jesus is. And so when John says the Word, the Logos, became flesh, he is saying that this intermediary divine being, this being that bridges the enormous gap between God and the material world, this thing of the living God, the bond of everything, holding all things together and binding all parts and preventing them from being dissolved and separated, this thing that we understand and we believe in is Jesus. That makes this whole thing much different. And the Logos also is God's instrument in the creation of the universe. So here we go, drawing it all together, making it very simple. When that Jesus was the link between God and man. John says, is God and became flesh and dwelt among us. God, via his Son, became flesh and dwelt among us. That is the Logos. That term that is translated word means all of this stuff. And so if you don't take the time to research these things, you're just going to read the Word became flesh. And you're going to miss all of this, because this is what the people who first read the Gospel of John understood when they read. They didn't read the word, they read the word Logos. And when they heard Logos, all of this that we just talked about is exactly what would have been in their mind when he said that Jesus was the Logos. This was huge. This was one of the most enormous things that these people could have ever come to, because many of these people were longing and wondering what this Logos was, and many of these people wanted this connection with God, but they couldn't really have a direct relationship with God, because their relationship with God was through this Logos. And now this Logos becomes flesh and is walking among men. You can actually go and touch him. So once again, John says, God became flesh, dwelt among us, and you could actually go and you could have a relationship with him. Huge. And subsequently, Jesus, God, sent his Spirit to be with us, which is omnipresent, or present everywhere at the same time. So now God is still present with us, all of us, available to us always. He is the bond of the body of Christ, holding all things together and binding all the parts, and prevents them from being dissolved or separated. Jesus is the bond that holds us all together. Once you are of the Spirit and in the Spirit, Jesus is the bond that holds us all together, causes us all to be one part, keeps us from being dissolved and lost and separated. And that same Jesus is available to you. He is around you. He is near you right now, regardless of who you are, what you think, what you believe. Through the Holy Spirit, Jesus is available to you right now. And all you have to do is just speak to him. He will hear you. He wants to hear you. He wants to be near you. He wants to know you, and he wants you to know him. And that's why he went to the cross. He came, became man, went to the cross, died on our behalf so that he could be near to you today. So I just pray that you get this and you understand it. I pray that this either furthers your understanding of who Jesus is, furthers your understanding of 1 John, or maybe for the first time ever, causes you to understand that the God of the universe, who you probably once felt was far from you, is not far from you at all. He came to this earth so that he could be with us. He sent his Spirit back among us so that he can continue to be near us, and he wants you to be near to him today. So he's available. If you have any other questions, please reach out to me. I'd be glad to discuss this with you anytime. But cry out to him today, because he will hear you and he is near you. Thanks for joining us.